The HOA president was screaming as two federal agents cuffed him in front of the entire neighborhood, his $5 million empire sinking, literally, into swampy ruin behind him. Cameras flashed, neighbors cheered, and I just stood there, steady hands on my lens, capturing the moment he realized justice had finally come for him. Funny thing is, all he had to do was leave my creek alone. You ever have one of those mornings where everything feels perfect right up until it doesn't? It was the first clear April morning we'd had in a while, cool breeze, golden light hitting the treetops just right. I stepped out onto the porch of my late mother's cabin, the one she left me when she passed. 3 quiet acres, some woods, and the best damn creek in Hollow County. Ethan Walker here, 58 years old, retired civil engineer, now full-time wildlife photographer and unofficial caretaker of Walker Creek. Coffee in hand, camera slung over my shoulder, I was hoping to catch a glimpse of the early warblers heading north. But instead of birdsong and rushing water, I was met with silence. The kind of silence that tells you something's wrong. I walked to the edge of the porch, squinting toward the creek. And that's when I saw it. The sparkle of water was gone. In its place was something gray, unnatural, and horrifyingly still. I stepped down fast, coffee forgotten. As I got closer, my boots hit soft earth, then something firmer, unnaturally so. I dropped to my knees, ran my hand across the surface. Concrete. Cold. Wet in spots. Still curing. My breath caught in my throat. My family's creek, the one that had flowed uninterrupted for over 100 years, the one that fed into protected wetlands downstream, it was gone. Choked out by a wall of gray. I stumbled back, pulled my camera to my eye, and started taking pictures. Years of working as an engineer had trained me to document everything, and right now, every frame I snapped was evidence. I followed the concrete upstream as far as I could without waders, and the devastation stretched well beyond my property line. This wasn't just an accident. This was deliberate. And then I heard it. The unmistakable growl of off-road tires on gravel. A white Cadillac Escalade rounded the bend onto my private drive like it owned the place. Emblazoned on the side in sleek lettering, Reeves Development Group. Out stepped the man himself, Clinton. Reeves, 45, perfectly groomed, wearing a blazer over designer jeans like he was heading to a luxury open house. The man oozed charm the way a used car salesman oozes discounts. "Morning, Mr. Walker," he called, like we were neighbors just bumping into each other at the mailbox. "Hope we didn't wake you with the noise yesterday." "Just some minor drainage work upstream." I stared at him, expressionless. "You filled my creek with concrete." His smile didn't flinch, but I caught the momentary flicker in his eyes. "Let's not be dramatic. The Hollow Pines HOA voted to reinforce the drainage corridor. The seasonal runoff has been undermining soil integrity. That's a protected waterway," I said evenly. "And that runoff, as you call it, supports the Durant wetland ecosystem. You just committed a felony." Now, Clinton said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Our lawyers say it's well within code. We've been more than generous with our offers, Ethan. Let's not escalate this. You and I both know this property would be better off as part of Hollow Pines." I took another picture, Clinton standing like some twisted developer king in front of his concrete abomination. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations, I said. "And I don't sell to bullies in sport coats." His mask cracked just a little. "Your land is an eyesore. We're building homes that sell for $2.5 million. Your cabin, your overgrown trees, your so-called natural creek, they're dragging the entire development's value down." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then stop building near it." His nostrils flared. "This can go easy or it can go hard, Mr. Walker. But the HOA is moving forward either way." I raised my camera again and said, "You just made a mistake, Mr. Reeves. And I'm going to make sure everyone sees it." He turned on his heel and climbed into the Escalade. "You're going to regret this," he called as he drove off. "No one fights the HOA and wins." Gravel sprayed as he peeled out. I Turned back toward the house, camera in hand, heart pounding, mind racing. That night, I sat at my mother's old desk, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. I opened the filing cabinet she had guarded like Fort Knox and dug through land deeds, surveys, everything. And there it was, a copy of the original 1923 water rights filing signed by my great-grandfather and the state. It granted uninterrupted flow and legal protection to Walker Creek as a tributary to a designated wetland system. The words unalterable in perpetuity jumped out like a thunderclap. I wasn't just angry now, I was armed. I spent the next 48 hours in front of my computer, combing through public records, HOA filings, and land use permits. Thanks to some of my old engineering contacts, I accessed environmental assessments, scanned aerial maps, even obtained meeting minutes from the Hollow Pines HOA. That's when I found it, a set of internal notes from 6 months ago referencing the Walker obstacle. Underlined 3 times. Followed by a 3-point action plan: restrict upstream flow. Allow seasonal rains to increase damage. Approach owner with offer under stress. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just shady. This was war. And Clinton Reeves had fired the first shot. The next day, I drove to a contractor's yard on the outskirts of town. According to the HOA documents, the concrete pour was done by Pierce and Sons Excavation. I found Logan Pierce leaning against a trailer with a cigarette and a face full of regret. "You Walker?" he asked. "That's me." I showed him the photos. He went pale. "Jesus," he whispered. "I thought it was just retention work." Clinton said all the paperwork was handled. Paid me in cash. I knew it smelled funny, but I've got a kid with asthma and bills up to my neck. "Did you pull any permits yourself?" I asked. "No," he said. "But I kept the work orders." Clinton didn't want any digital records. Said it was better for expediency. I handed him my card. "You just became a key witness." Back home, I set up a spreadsheet: dates, evidence, GPS-tagged photos, drone footage. I ran water flow simulations using old software from my engineering days. What I discovered made my blood run cold, and my case stronger. The dam didn't just block the creek. It raised the water table enough to start flooding low-lying areas of Hollow Pines. Their million-dollar lawns? Already getting soggy. Their basements? On the brink. I wasn't the victim of Reeves's scheme. They were. All of them. And Mother Nature? She was pissed. As night fell, I watched rain clouds rolling over the horizon. I looked down at the photos I'd taken that morning, the ones with dead fish lying on freshly poured concrete, their bodies still shining under the gray sky. I whispered under my breath, "You buried the wrong creek, Clinton." And the rain began to fall. The rain that night didn't just fall, it punished. By morning, the air was thick with the smell of wet earth and blooming dogwoods, and my land glistened like something sacred. Walker Creek, or what was left of it, had transformed into a shallow trench of concrete misery. But across the tree line, I noticed something that made my stomach twist with a sick sort of satisfaction: standing water. Not on my property. On theirs. Hollow Pines Estates. The million-dollar subdivision that Clinton Reeves had built like some Roman emperor planning his empire: manicured lawns, infinity pools, foundation to rooftop sprinkler systems calibrated to the millimeter. And now? All that wealth was beginning to sink. I loaded my drone and let it rise into the thick gray morning, watching through my phone screen as the camera panned across the development. What I saw made me laugh out loud. Lawns that once looked like putting greens now resembled rice paddies. One home even had a maintenance crew trying to pump water out of a sunken garden with what looked like pool hoses in sheer desperation. The dam Clinton had built to drown me was backfiring, literally. The water table had shifted. The natural flow of the creek, now blocked, was reversing course, saturating the lowest parts of Hollow Pines from the roots up. Nature wasn't just getting even. She was setting terms. I recorded everything, every drone shot, every muddy trench, every puddle creeping up foundation lines like a warning. And then, almost on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a homeowner. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was sharp with panic. "Mr. Walker? You don't know me. I'm Brian Morgan. We live on Sycamore Bend. My wife got your number from the public land office. Our basement flooded last night. There's mold. We can't get answers from the HOA." I paused. "Why are you calling me?" His voice dropped. "Because rumor is, you know what's going on. And if what we're hearing is true about the dam, the permits, all of it, then we've all been duped." I took a long breath. "Meet me at the HOA meeting this Friday. Bring every document you've got. It's time people heard the truth." By Friday, word had spread like wildfire. The normally sterile Hollow Pines clubhouse, Italian marble floors, faux Tuscan chandeliers, was packed to the rafters. Angry homeowners, soaked landscapers, even a few local reporters with press badges tucked into polos. I slipped into the back with my laptop and camera bag. Karen Fields, one of the board members, gave me a nod, not quite friendly, but no longer hostile. Clinton strutted to the front in his usual confidence armor, gray blazer, navy tie, and a look that said, "You all need me." "Let's get this started," he said into the mic. "I know there have been concerns about recent weather events and how they've affected drainage. We're working on solutions." "Weather events," someone shouted from the floor. "My garage smells like a sewer." "Our garden's dead," yelled another. "My toddler's been coughing for a week." Clinton held up his hands. "Please. One at a time." That's when I stood. "Point of order," I said loudly. "I have evidence that what's happening isn't about weather. It's about fraud, environmental sabotage, and abuse of power." Clinton's eyes locked on mine like lasers. "You don't have standing, Mr. Walker. You're not a homeowner here." But Karen Field spoke up, her voice clear. "Under county law, public comment is permitted when environmental impact is involved. He may proceed." I walked to the projector. Clinton tried to unplug it, too late. I was already displaying the drone footage. Aerial views of flooded basements, backed up storm drains, rising pools in yards where there shouldn't be water. Next came photos, before and after shots of Walker Creek. My creek. A living waterway turned into a slab of illegal concrete. Then the documents, HOA minutes showing the plan labeled Walker Obstacle. Clinton's signature right there beside it. Finally, I played an audio clip of Logan Pierce. He paid me in cash. No permits. Said it was just a temporary dam for testing drainage. We worked at night because he didn't want the county to find out. The room went silent. Then came the sound of slow-building anger, a rumble of voices ready to boil over. Clinton stepped forward, voice tight. "This is all out of context. Mr. Walker is a disgruntled neighbor trying to sabotage our progress. He's manipulating footage and, do you have permits, Mr. Reeves?" a calm voice asked from the doorway. Everyone turned. A woman in a tan blazer and boots stepped inside, a badge clipped to her waist, Rachel Dawes, County Environmental Enforcement. She walked to the front, unfolded a paper, and held it up. "This is a cease and desist order for unauthorized alterations to a protected waterway. Effective immediately." Clinton sputtered. "That can't be." "Oh, it is," Rachel interrupted. "I've been monitoring Hollow Pines for months. What Mr. Walker just presented fills every gap I needed for prosecution." Chaos erupted. Homeowners shouted. Someone, Lydia Morgan, I think, stood on a chair and held up a folder. "My husband did some digging. Clinton Reeves has run HOAs in 3 other states, each one left in shambles. Missing funds, flooding, lawsuits. One community in Arizona is still in litigation over sinkholes." Karen Field stepped forward now, no longer quiet. "I move for a vote of no confidence in President Reeves." "Seconded," someone yelled. "Third. All in favor?" Nearly every hand went up. Clinton's face had gone from red to pale to something close to green. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I built Hollow Pines. Without me, your homes wouldn't even exist. Without you," someone else yelled, "our homes wouldn't be underwater." Rachel approached Clinton with the grace of a hawk circling its prey. "Mr. Reeves, I'd like to speak to you privately. About permit fraud. About illegal material usage. About environmental destruction." And then came the final nail. Karen Field stepped to the podium, lifted up a survey map she'd obtained that morning from the county clerk. "These," she said, pointing to the flagged areas, "are survey markers found on the far end of the wetland behind Ethan's land. They mark 12 proposed lots for expansion. Reeves's plan wasn't just to remove the creek. He wanted to wipe out the entire wetland to build more houses and a golf course." Clinton broke. "It's just business. You think this is about some stupid stream?" "It's not just a stream," I said, stepping forward. "It's a protected waterway. A living part of this ecosystem. And you tried to bury it, for profit." The room stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, Lydia Morgan began to clap. Others joined. It wasn't triumphant. It was relief. Catharsis. Something had cracked wide open in Hollow Pines, and there was no putting it back. Rachel turned to me. "Mr. Walker, I need your photos, measurements, everything you've documented." "You'll have it tonight," I said. And there's more. As homeowners filed out in stunned clusters, I packed up my laptop, heart pounding, not from fear, but purpose. Hollow Pines was crumbling, but it wasn't just about one man's corruption anymore. This was about the power of silence being broken. The beginning of something stronger than lawsuits or concrete walls. The beginning of justice rising. And nature reclaiming what was hers. The night after the HOA meeting, I sat alone at my mother's desk, same spot where this mess had really begun, listening to the distant chorus of frogs reclaiming what used to be their home. The air smelled cleaner already, like even the trees were breathing easier now that the concrete tyranny was exposed. I thought the storm had passed, that the community had seen the truth, and that justice had finally caught up to Clinton Reeves. I was wrong. The next morning, a knock at my door came just after sunrise. A young man in a too-big blazer handed me an envelope and mumbled, "You've been served." Inside, a personal lawsuit from Clinton Reeves. $10 million for defamation, interference with business interests, and emotional distress. I actually laughed. It was so perfectly absurd it could have been a headline in The Onion. But there it was, official, aggressive, and unmistakably desperate. I poured a fresh cup of coffee and called Nina Alvarez. She was 42, sharp as a box cutter, and the kind of attorney who read environmental statutes for fun. Nina had been recommended by Karen Fields after the HOA board flipped. She took one look at the case file and smirked. "This guy's going to hang himself in court," she said. "All you need to do is sit back and let gravity do the work." Lucky for us, gravity's undefeated. 3 months later, on a bright June morning with summer clinging to the courthouse steps, we walked into the packed gallery. Local press, environmental groups, Hollow Pines residents, even a few people from nearby counties showed up. The headline trial of Clinton Reeves versus Ethan Walker had become more than a property dispute. It had become a referendum on greed, abuse of power, and the weaponization of HOAs. The judge was Honorable Deborah Kingsley, a no-nonsense woman in her late 60s with a reputation for getting flimsy lawsuits in under 10 minutes. Clinton represented himself. Not because he believed in his own legal brilliance, but because no lawyer in the county would take his case. He opened with a 10-minute tirade about conspiracies, sabotage, and how Ethan Walker orchestrated a targeted ecological attack on my community. At one point, he suggested I had secretly installed underground pumps to reverse the water table. The room was dead silent except for the sound of Nina tapping her pen, waiting for her moment. "Your Honor," she said calmly when it was our turn. "We'll begin with a few facts." She laid out everything. Drone footage of the illegal dam. Photos of the dead fish. Hydrology simulations showing water diversion patterns. HOA meeting minutes with Clinton's signature authorizing Operation Clearwater, the plan to flood my property. Testimony from Logan Pierce, Tyler Brooks, and Rachel Dawes. And then, the bombshell, subpoenaed bank records showing large cash withdrawals from HOA accounts, timed exactly with contractor payments for the unauthorized work. These were reported as landscape maintenance, Nina explained. But they funded the unpermitted destruction of a protected creek. Clinton stood and shouted, "This is hearsay. It's all doctored." The judge peered over her glasses. "Mr. Reeves, please sit down." Nina wasn't done. "Your Honor, we also have a recorded confession from a former county permitting clerk, stating Mr. Reeves offered him a $20,000 bribe to expedite zoning changes for the wetland area behind Hollow Pines." The courtroom gasped. Clinton's face changed color again, first red, then white, then something between the two that matched the concrete he poured. When Judge Kingsley dismissed the case with prejudice, she didn't just end it. She ended Clinton. "Not only does this suit lack merit," she said, "but it appears to be an attempt to intimidate a whistleblower and deflect from your own criminal conduct. I am referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution." Clinton exploded. "You're all in on it. This is a witch hunt." But the bailiffs were already approaching. One of them leaned down and said something softly, and just like that, Clinton's bravado crumbled. He slumped into his chair, silent for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, he was indicted on multiple federal charges: environmental crimes, fraud, embezzlement, and bribery. The EPA moved fast. With Rachel Dawes leading the charge, a full-scale restoration effort began. The toxic concrete was carefully excavated. Specialized teams rebuilt Walker Creek's natural flow. Boulders were reintroduced. Native grasses were replanted. Wildlife returned. The herons came back first, then the minnows, then the frogs. Within 3 months, the entire area looked like it had never been touched by greed. Clinton Reeves, meanwhile, pled guilty in a federal court to avoid a longer sentence. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. Investigators found over $3.1 million hidden in offshore shell companies, all of it traced back to misappropriated HOA funds and illegal development schemes. That money was used to reimburse homeowners, repair foundation damage, and finish the restoration. Hollow Pines, once the symbol of forced perfection, became something different. Real. Humbled. United. They held monthly potlucks now, not board meetings. The new HOA bylaws, rewritten by Karen Fields, required 75% resident approval for any major decisions and banned future development near wetland areas. My own land became a point of local pride. Schools brought students to visit the newly restored creek. The State Wildlife Agency installed educational signage. I turned my experience into a photo exhibit titled "When Greed Sank the Ground." It toured galleries across the state and ended up featured in a national environmental magazine. One afternoon, standing next to my exhibit, Rachel Dawes gave a short speech. "This case changed everything," she said. "It reminded us that environmental law isn't just about permits and codes, it's about people. About ecosystems. About truth." I watched her speak and remembered standing in the mud, looking at dead fish and concrete, camera trembling in my hands. I remembered the fear. The anger. And now, the justice. One evening, just before dusk, I heard a knock at my porch door. It was Lydia Morgan, holding a pie. "Blueberry," she said. "We thought you deserved something sweet." I smiled. "I'm partial to cherry, but blueberry'll do." She laughed, then looked out at the creek. "We used to call this place an eyesore. Now it's the best part of the neighborhood. I'm sorry it took us so long to see that." "Sometimes it takes a flood," I said. She nodded. "We're selling. Not because of the damage. That's mostly fixed. But this whole thing made us realize we don't need all this. We want something quieter, simpler. Something like this. I watched her walk back toward the street, toward the place that had almost been a monument to greed. A place now slowly learning how to heal. And I thought, maybe we all were. The final piece came in the form of an email from the County Historical Society. Turns out, my great-grandfather wasn't just a homesteader. He was the original water rights surveyor for this entire region. The very same paperwork I'd found in my mother's files had been used to establish protected status for Walker Creek back in 1907. That land, that water, it had never really been mine. I was just the latest to protect it. As the sun set, I sat on my porch, camera on my lap, coffee in hand, and watched the heron glide across the sky. The creek babbled below, running clear, proud, and free. Just like truth. Just like justice. And in that moment, I knew you can bury a creek in concrete. But you can't bury the truth. Not forever. Not here. Thank you for joining me on this story. Before we close, I want to take a moment, as the author, and as someone who's watched stories like Ethan Walker's unfold in real life, to share the deeper lesson that lies beneath the concrete, the courtrooms, and the chaos. Here's what this story reminds us: justice often moves slowly, and sometimes it starts with just one person paying attention. Ethan wasn't a politician, a lawyer, or a powerful executive. He was a retired engineer with a camera, a quiet man living on land passed down through generations. But he had two things that made all the difference: the truth and the courage to stand his ground. In a world where HOA boards can sometimes act like mini-governments and developers can blur the lines between improvement and destruction, it's easy to feel powerless. But you're never powerless if you have documentation, knowledge, and the will to fight back. So here's the advice, plain and simple. Document everything. Keep records, take photos, know your property lines, and understand your rights. Don't assume silence means consent. If something feels wrong, start asking questions. Dig deeper. Know the law, or find someone who does. People like Nina Alvarez and Rachel Dawes exist in every town. And they care more than you think. And finally, never underestimate the power of one steady voice in a room full of noise. Because of one man's refusal to be bullied, an entire community changed. A creek was saved. A corrupt empire collapsed. And people who once prioritized property values over principle found something more meaningful: connection, conscience, and community. At U.S. Daily Story, we share tales like this because they reflect the real struggles and quiet triumphs of everyday Americans. We believe stories can do more than entertain. They can open eyes, stir hearts, and remind us that when ordinary people stand up, extraordinary things can happen. If this story moved you, made you angry, made you think, or just made you cheer a little inside when Clinton Reeves got let out of that courtroom, then we've done our job. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for being a part of a community that values truth, justice, and the simple beauty of doing the right thing. Until next time, this is U.S. Daily Story. Keep watching. Keep questioning. And never forget, sometimes, all it takes is one voice, one camera, and a little water finding its level to change everything.